Schoolboy back again. Welcome back to a new video. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to retouch or edit an image from 0 to 100%. I mean from the scratch. So this video, I'm purposely targeting beginners. So if you're a beginner and you want to know how to edit an image in Photoshop, then this is the right video for you. Alright, so as a beginner, you are probably going to shoot just a flat, normal style of photo. You are probably not going to shoot in RAW. So with this tutorial, I'm not using a RAW image, but I advise you shoot in RAW if only you are using a DSLR or a mirrorless or a digital camera. I advise you shoot in RAW. That way you get more detail and more dynamic range in your images and more room to work with. But as a beginner, you are probably going to shoot with a smartphone or just a point and shoot camera, so you are not going to shoot in RAW. So this is the image we are going to use for this tutorial. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing that you are going to do is to select this tool. There is a tool here called the patch tool. The patch tool, which is this tool. This tool is used to remove some little imperfections or some things laying around the image that you wouldn't like to be there. So that is what the patch tool is for. It's basically for patching. So if, let's say, there's, as you can see, there are some goats here. If this is what you don't like, you just circle around. Before I do it, let me duplicate my background layer first. Always remember that. Always duplicate the layer so that you have a backup. You work on a different layer and you keep the original layer. So you select the patch tool in case there is something you want to remove or clear out of the image, which is distracting or disturbing the image. You can do that by using the patch tool. So you select the patch tool and then you circle around the image just like this, and then you patch the area just like this. So as you can see, I just finished patching. Here is a quick before and after, and you can move on to this little reflector right here. So with the reflector tool, I can select it with the patch tool just like this, and then I can patch right about here. Yeah, so I think it's fine now. Alright, so if you take a look at where the reflector was, now the reflector is no more and the goats are no more. So that's the first thing you want to do, to select the patch tool and make sure to remove any unwanted things from the image. So we are going to go ahead and remove this little grasses. So I nearly said glasses, sorry. I nearly said glasses. So you have to remove these little grasses from here. I don't think I want them to be there. So you just use the patch tool. You circle it and then you patch. You circle it and then you patch. So that's how the patch tool is used here. So in order not to make this video so long, I'm not going to remove all these grasses from the ground because I think it's going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to remove a few just to show you how this tool works, and then we move on to the second step. Alright, so as you can see, here is a before and after of what we have done, and so far so good. We haven't done anything huge, but you can see the improvement only the patch tool has on the image. Alright, so the next thing that we are going to do is to take the image to camera raw. If you shoot the image in RAW, Photoshop is automatically going to open the image in Camera Raw. But let's say the image wasn't shot in the raw format, just like this one. You have to open the Camera Raw just by yourself, or you have to go to settings to change the settings and make it in such a way that every image, being it a raw image or not, is going to open through Camera Raw. But with this Photoshop, with my Photoshop, I haven't enabled that feature, so it only opens, Camera Raw only opens raw files. So in order to open a JPEG file with Camera Raw, I have to select Shift plus Control plus A. So Shift Control plus A to take the image to Camera Raw, and this is where we are going to perform our basic little adjustment. So the first thing that we are going to do is to take a very deep look at the image and see where the flaws are. So as you can see, during this photo shoot, there was the clouds were dark because it was about to rain, and as you can see, there's a little bit of shadows on her skin and a little bit of shadows right here. So in order to clear that out, I have to come to the shadows right and pull the shadows. You don't have to do it too much. If I bring it right here, you can see how well distorted the image is. So you just have to pull it small so you notice a change, and I think right about here is fine. So here is the before and here is the after. Alright, so the next thing that we are going to do is to add a little bit of contrast. So I always add +5 or +10 of contrast to the image, depending on the image. So with this image, I think I'm going to add +10 of contrast, and here is the before and after. Alright, so if the image is underexposed, you are going to pull the exposure slider. So if it's underexposed, you are going to pull it right here to add a little bit of exposure. If it's overexposed, you are going to bring down the exposure to compensate for the image. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to add clarity. I always add clarity to my image. It gives it some type of sharpness that I really like to see in my images, but I always have to make sure you don't overdo it. This is how it's going to look, and that is something you don't want to have in your images. Always keep your editing or your retouching as minimal, as clean, and as simple as possible. So we are going to add just a little bit of clarity. So I think sorry guys, so I think +15 will be okay. And also you edit the image based on how you want it to look. So I'm editing this image based on how I want the image to look. So every image has a different style of editing. Every image has a different style of color grading. Always have that in mind. The way I'm editing this picture sorry guys, isn't the same way I'm going to edit maybe a portrait or something like that. So here is the before and here is the after. Alright, so the next thing is to add just a little bit of vibrance. Just a little bit of vibrance. I don't add saturation because it makes the colors too much. Alright, so the next thing we are going to do is to move on to the sharpness and add just a little bit of sharpness. So I'm going to add, let's say, +20. +20 is okay, and then we are going to move on to the HSL adjustment. Now here is where most of the magic happens. Here is where you play with individual colors and turn the image upside down. So as you can see, we have the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. Alright, so as you can see, we have reds, oranges, yellows, greens, aquas, blues, purples, and magentas. So based on the colors you have in the images, as you can see with this image, we have some blues, some greens, some blacks, some oranges and some reds in the skin tone. So those are the colors that we are going to play with. So I'm firstly going to bring down the reds just a little bit because she has a fair skin, so I don't want the skin, it will be too much. So I just think I'm going to bring the reds right down here to +8 -8, and then as you can see the ground here is orange, so I think I'm going to add a little bit of oranges, and there are some oranges in the skin tones as well, so that's why I brought my reds down. Imagine my reds was here, you see it has been overdone, so I think I'm going to bring it down to compensate for the oranges. So I just add +23 of the oranges, and then there are a little bit of yellows too, so I'm going to add a little bit of yellows, and then I'm going to add a little bit of greens. This is the reason why I don't add saturation. Saturation adds overall colors, it saturates the entire colors in the image. But with the HSL adjustment layer, which is the hue, saturation and luminance adjustment layer, you have the ability to increase the saturation of each and every individual color. So if I want the saturation only in the oranges, I can come here and pull the saturation of the oranges, whereas if I pull the saturation slider right here, it's going to add saturation to the greens and the blues. Meanwhile, that's not where I want the saturation to be. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say. Alright, so the next thing is to add a little bit of blue, and then a little, I don't think they are more aqua, but I'm going to add a little bit just in case. So the next thing I'm going to do is to come to the hue and invert some of the colors. So as you can see, there are some greens here, so I'm going to play with the slider just a little bit. So if I pull it up, it becomes more green. If I pull it down, it becomes yellow. So based on how you want the image to look, that is how you are going to edit it. So I don't think I'm going to make it look green like this, so I'm going to make it look yellowish brown, just like this. And then with the oranges too, I'm going to play with it just a little bit. Since there are oranges in the skin tones, if I play with the oranges, if I move the slider of the oranges, it's going to mess up the skin tones, and that is one thing you should always have in mind. Always pay attention to the skin tones. There are some colors that are in the skin tones, like yellows and reds, and if you don't take care with your yellows and red, you are going to mess up the skin tones, and you would have to fix it, and it's going to take a whole lot of time and skills. So in order to prevent that, you just have to take your time and pay more attention to the skin tones and the colors in the skin tones. Alright, so the next thing we are going to do is to play with the blues just a little bit, change the colors just a little bit. So I think right about here is also fine. Right about here is also fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is to move on to the luminance, and luminance is basically brighten, like highlights and shadows of each and individual color. So if I want the reds, let me use the blues. If I want the blues to be more brighter, just pull it up, and as you can see, it has made the blues brighter. To have a little bit of depth, I'm going to pull it like this. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring down the blues right about here, because I think that looks cool in my opinion. And then with the yellows too, I'm going to add just a little bit of light to the yellows and to the greens. I'm going to put down the greens to add a little bit of shadows to the greens as well. So here is a quick before and after, a quick before and after. I think my clarity was too much. I'm going to come back here and then bring my clarity down to +10. So now I think +10 is fine. So here is a quick before and after. Always make sure to come back and do something if necessary. If you think something is a little too much, always come back and correct it. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to do is to come to the calibration and add just few colors. So if I put the saturation of the blue primary, you can see it affects the entire image, but it makes the skin more reddish, and we can easily fix that when we apply this, and it opens in where we edit the image in Photoshop. Yeah, let me say it that way. So I think I'm going to increase the blue primary right about here. It adds more red to the skin tones, but I'm going to bring down the saturation of the reds, so that isn't going to be a problem. So as you can see, we have our red primary here. So if I bring down the saturation of the reds, as you can see, look at the skin tones. If I bring down the reds, you see reds leaves the skin tone, but it also affects the entire image. So it's not something I would like to do too much. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of reds. I think right about here is fine. 20 is fine, and I'm going to go back to my HSL adjustment layer and go to the saturation and bring down my red here just a little bit. So here is the before and here is the after. So I'm just going to add a little bit of greens too, and I'm going to play with the hue of the green just a little bit. You've noticed, bring it down right here, it doesn't look nice, it looks overly saturated. So I'm going to bring it up just about here, and I think it looks fine. I'm going to bring down the reds to just a little bit, and I think it's fine. I think right about here it's fine. So here is the before and here is the after. I think I'm going to bring down my reds more because I don't want the skin to be oversaturated. I don't want the skin to be too red, so I'm going to bring down both the reds and the saturation of the blue primary right about here, and I think it looks perfect now. So here is the before and here is the after. So I'm going to select OK, click on OK, open it in Photoshop, and then we are going to add some few touches. So here is the before, here is the after. Before, let me zoom in, after, before and after, and we did this just in camera raw, and we did this. So if there are some blemishes on the skin too, you can go ahead and zoom in on the skin and use the patch tool to also kind of remove blemishes on the skin. But if you don't want to use the patch tool for the blemishes on the skin, you can use the there is a tool here, healing brush tool. I think this is it. Yeah, spot healing brush tool. And as you can see how Photoshop is demonstrating it right there, it's remove blemishes just like this. So if there are some little imperfections on the skin, you can select these two and then you can brush, or can brush over them just like so to remove them, and it looks amazing. So here is a quick before and after, before and after, and as you can see, it looks nice. You can probably post this picture on your social medias and you are good to go. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to talk about is to crop your image. So you can hit C on your keyboard to select the crop image, or you can come right here and click on the crop image. And if you are going to post this on Instagram, you have to crop the image to the Instagram aspect ratio, which is 4:5. So you can select ratio here and select 4:5. But if you aren't going to post it on Instagram, you can use the normal aspect ratio of the image, and it's going to be fine. Let's say Facebook or WhatsApp or wherever, the normal aspect ratio is fine. But if you are going to post it on Instagram, you really have to select the 4:5 and crop it yourself to get the full image when you post it on Instagram. Right, so you frame your images like this, and as you can see, the horizon of the image is a little bit slanted, so I'm going to select this straighten right here, and I'm going to straighten this image just a little bit. So I'm going to draw a line from here. As you can see, that is how the image is right now, and I'm going to leave it, and it has straightened the image pretty nice. So I'm going to hit enter to crop the image, and then as you can see, voila, this is how the image looks. So here is a before and after of the image, and this was done just in camera raw. So that is the end of today's video. If you did learn something new, if you did like this video, please leave a thumbs up. Comment down below on any video you would like to see on this channel, and then I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.